Now, please welcome our moderator of this session, Mr. Merlin Lau, Head of Policy and Research of BEC. Please also welcome our panelist, Mr. Roberto Giannetta, Chairman of the Hong Kong Liner Shipping Association, Mr. Richard Ho, Managing Director of Citybus Limited, Mr. Simon Lee, Chief Strategy Officer of EcoCeres, and Mr. Wilson Lam, Director of Multi-Franchise Division of Zung Company Limited. Please be on stage for the panel discussion. And I will now pass the time to you. Merlin, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, right. Thank you for coming back. Hope you had your coffee. So our panel is going to talk about, as the title said, decarbonizing all forms of transport for sustainable mobility. Actually, I curated the section, and there's a reason for that, why we have these panelists. And for instance, we know maybe for passenger vehicles, it's more straightforward. Let's go along electrification. But how about for aviation, for shipping, and also like for commercial vehicle, whether from the bus operation or else from a truck perspective. So that's why we have all the panelists here with us. To help warm up the discussion, because I think most people came back, right, for those at the back as well. Let's ask 2 questions before we speak, maybe 3, just came into my mind. First question, anyone working in transport sector? Hands up. No, 2, 1, 2, 3. You all work on there. Okay, maybe just a few hands. So we talk about decarbonizing the sectors, right? How many of you think your business would actually be utilizing such kind of mode of transport to decarbonize in your operation? You think that's relevant? Raise your hands. Half. Okay, some maybe SME, some like courier. So now you know your audience, right? I think what I'm going to do, actually, I'm not going to introduce you again, because the way we do it, this section will be a little bit different from previously. So we'll ask each panelist, you have a few minutes to talk about your work, of course, related to decarbonization, and about the status quo you think in this in your particular transport sector. And I will be doing a follow-up question just to remind the presentation, right? Trying to align what we are trying to talk about today. Progress means status. Actually, I always got success like cases, and then the barriers and accelerators. You have 5 minutes, and then I will try to take up some point and follow up with some questions. So we'll go with the flow. First, go into shipping first. Roberto.
All right, thank you very much. Yes, my name is Roberto Giannetta. I'm the chairman for the Hong Kong Liner Shipping Association. How do I get back? There we go. Yes, I'm the chairman for the Hong Kong Liner Shipping Association. This association is comprised of all of the container liner operators that are responsible for carriage of 90% of the goods and services that we use all around the world, and they're connecting Hong Kong with the rest of the globe. Shipping represents 3% of global emissions for CO2. And given that we are moving 90% of the goods around the world, this is already the most efficient and the greenest form of transportation that exists. We're already using the latest technologies and commercially available options that we have at our disposal. And shipping is not a country, so we can't say that there's a government that imposes the requirement that we meet a certain target. So what we do is that there is the United Nations that has an International Maritime Organization, the IMO, and we follow the IMO guidelines, which are targeting to reduce emissions by 2050. How do we do that? Well, there's a number of different ways that we can achieve reduction in emissions. The biggest way is through the propulsion system. At the moment, or historically, we use fossil fuel. In fact, we use the sludge at the bottom of the barrels is what the shipping has used historically in the past. We are transitioning to new fuels. Now, to do this, we need new engines. We need new ships. You can't just change the fuel. So there's a number of fuel options that we have at our disposal. The first one is LNG at the moment. This is the only one that is commercially available and supply is available around the world. But it is not going to get us to much emissions reductions. It can only achieve 20 to 30% reduction. So it's considered a transitional fuel. These other ones, methanol is probably the next biggest one, and ammonia coming up later. Hydrogen, I see very little. Nuclear ultimately will be our end goal because that's the only way to achieve zero emissions. I'm not talking about plutonium and uranium. We're not talking about Chernobyl on a ship. What we're talking about are small movable reactors like the molten salt reactors. These are technologies that are being developed, but they're not going to be with us for another 20, 30 years. So we do have to, in the interim, move forward with these fuel options. Outside of fuel, there are other ways that we can achieve some efficiencies, and that's through power, changing our shaft generators or using waste heat recovery. There's also hydrodynamic tools that we can use to make the lubrication smoother, make it more efficient, rudder bulbs. And then there's also the aerodynamics, and we are looking at and already using kites and sails that will help improve our efficiency. But even then, we still need other ways to achieve our goals. I just dropped my notes. Thank you, sir. So with these new fuels, I mentioned LNG is the first one that is available, and we have access to that in Hong Kong. We have never been able to do bunkering, putting fuel into ships in Hong Kong other than fossil fuel. The legislative amendments that are needed for that have not been filed, have not been finalized. We note that the Hong Kong government is planning to do that within this year. We also know that the first LNG bunkering will take place within this year. PetroChina has already confirmed that they will be available and are going to be doing the first bunkering within probably December, and they will be available for others. I know that CLP also has the ability. We have LNG in Hong Kong. We just need to get it from the FSRU to Kwai Chung. So anybody that has a barge that can help us do that, that's what we're really needing right now. But even if we have these new vessels, we're building more vessels faster than we ever have in history. We have, for example, seen 40 new vessels coming out in the month of March and 50 in April. That's the equivalent of 11,000 TEUs, containers, per day. That's the size of a ship that you normally would go to the U.S. We're seeing a new one of those being put onto the oceans every single day. But the supply of availability of these green fuels is where the problem is. We only have enough supply for 2% of the current demand. Now, despite all of this, we are not quite there yet. Globally, research tells us that emissions have gone up in the last 30 years. They've gone up by 1.3%. And it to continue to go up is not that we are not transitioning as a world, as all industries across the board, but rather that the need for energy is greater than it ever has been before. And the need for new energy is growing faster than we can come out with the technology needed. There's also other issues that are happening in shipping that affect how we can use our fuel. For example, I think many of you are following the news that you know that the Houthis in Yemen are sending missiles to attack the ships that are transiting the Red Sea. Ships going between here and Europe would normally pass through the Suez Canal. That is the fastest way. But that canal has been closed off because of the bombs, the missiles that they keep shooting at any of the ships that approach that area. So as a result, our ships now need to go through around the southern part of Africa. That's an additional 6,000 kilometers. To put this in perspective, within 1 week, we are using up the same amount of distance as from here to the moon and back every single week. Our emissions are up. Comparing Q1 of 2024 versus Q4 of 2023, we've seen an increase of 63% in carbon emissions as a result of just the travel around Africa. Also, because of the extra distance, we need to run the ships faster, which burns more fuel. So the challenges that are before us are huge. But as an industry, we are doing what we can, and we are going to continue doing what is necessary in order to reach zero carbon emissions. So maybe I'll stop there, and we can cover more later.
Yeah, hi, I'm Mark Tang. What I am going to ask you. I think Simon first, actually. I think if we move on the next slide, right? Because I think for the shipping industry, we heard about different fuel options and also geopolitics issue that you mentioned. To us, what we discussed, because we are also operating the sustainable aviation fuel in a coalition in a sense that there's a common perspective for airlines or aviation industry to decarbonize in near to midterm is the use of sustainable aviation fuels. You are in this business, so maybe you introduce. Yeah, up to you. Like whatever way you want to do this. Yeah.
Podium. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Simon Lee. Thank you for Merlin for your introduction. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for a company called EcoCeres. EcoCeres is a producer of biofuel, and that included two products. One is sustainable aviation fuel, and also HVO, which is hydrotreated vegetable oil. I used to be a stock analyst for 23 years. So I always like to bring my conclusion to the investor first. Like I always bring a stock number to the investor first. But today, if there's only one takeaway you need to get from my 5 minutes presentation, it's very simple. 3 letters, SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. So with that, let me go through some of the slides with you and our equity story. So as Merlin mentioned, we are in the aviation sector. Aviation sector, interestingly, is accounting for around 3.5 trillion in terms of GDP. If you rank this aviation sector by country, it will be the 17th largest country in the world in terms of GDP. It accounts for, as Roberto also mentioned, we are also accounting for 2 to 3% of the global carbon emissions. But our sector is also very challenging to decarbonize. And the reason is that there's a lot of people who has not flown it. So that means there's still a very strong demand for flying. If you look at this to the bottom left, you can see that if we do nothing, just business as usual, our carbon intensity of our aviation sector is actually going to double by 2050. So that means that we do have a lot of flying demand, and at the same time, we have a lot of pressure to decarbonize. So if you look at to the right, that is what IATA is suggesting. How are we going to decarbonize the aviation sector? So obviously that would include optimizing the operation on routing or changing to some more efficient aircraft. But you can see the key green bar is the SAF, which is the using of the sustainable aviation fuel. It's estimated around 65% of this decarbonization effort in the aviation sector will be coming from SAF. Next page. So how are we going to do it? How can we enforce and push people to use more SAF? So you can see various countries have already introduced various policies. So I will basically say that there's 3 types of policies. So starting with Europe, they will use a policy called a mandate. So airlines and also fuel suppliers, they're obliged to use SAF. So basically, they have to blend our fuel into the jet fuel. Starting from next year. So Europe, there's a mandate is 2% from 2025, and then going up to 6% in 2030. So basically, it's a mandate obligation. Another policy which is used by the US is what we call it a carrot. Basically, an incentive, a production incentive. So more they produce, the more incentive they will get. And that will be the US approach. And then in Asia, we have Singapore announced that the third approach, which is the levy approach, basically is the passenger pay. So the passenger will have to bear the additional cost of the SAF. And you can see to the right, various countries, they are proposing various ways of either as a mandate or levy. But we expect that in the next 2 or 3 years, a lot of these countries will be announcing their policies as well. So it is a global effort. You can see leading by Europe and US, Asia Pacific, Singapore have announced it, and you can see a lot of countries have proposed it, some kind of various of policy. But we do expect that in the next 2 to 3 years, there will be more and more policy coming out. First slide, basically introduction to EcoCeres, what we do, and also our history. So what we do is basically, as we mentioned, we produce SAF and HVO. How do we do that? We actually get our raw material. We have 2 raw material. One is used cooking oil, so what is left behind after you fry your chicken, and also waste oil. In Asia, we have lots of palm oil, and we collect the waste palm oil from Malaysia and Indonesia. We have 2 plants. One of our first processing plant is in Jiangsu province, in Zhangjiagang. It is a 300,000 tons of plant producing both SAF and HVO. We are building our Malaysian plant in Johor, which is a bigger plant of 350,000 tons under construction. Should be completed by next year. On top of the technology we talk about, which we collect used cooking oil and also POMI, waste palm oil, to produce SAF, we also have another technology which also produces a similar product. In Hebei, you can see we collect corn cob. Certainly, in Hebei, in China, there's a lot of waste corn cob. We collect the corn cob and we produce cellulosic ethanol. Cellulosic ethanol with a further process can also be produced into SAF. So we also have a plant in Hebei, which is our second technology to produce cellulosic ethanol. As we talk about at the moment, because European has a mandate, so most of our product at the moment sell to Europe. So just a little bit about our company's history. Just placed here, actually EcoCeres was incubated by Tangas. But around 2 or 3 years ago, you can see that we have a lot of expansion. In 2021, we introduced a new investment fund in Singapore called Kerogen. And then 2 years ago, we introduced the Bain Capital. So we are now backed by Tangas, Bain Capital, and also Kerogen. And with their capital, as we mentioned, we further expanded into Malaysia. So we have a plant in Malaysia under construction. So I think to put into perspective of this conference, we do mention that we are in a very, very unique position to develop SAF. Because not only Hong Kong Airport, Peter is here, we are the largest air cargo airport in the world. If you look at Greater Bay Area, we actually have 7 airports. And we are building another one, another Guangzhou airport in Foshan. So we have a cluster of 8 airport. 3 of them is international. If you look at Guangzhou, Shenzhen, and Hong Kong, they are all ranked in top 10 airport in China. And I think it's also very important to note that with the Foshan airport in Guangzhou building, Guangzhou will be the 3rd city in China have a dual airport, right? In Beijing, as you know, we have a capital airport in Daqing, and Shanghai, obviously, we have the international airport in Pudong, and also Hongqiao, and Guangzhou will be the 3rd city. So we believe that there is a lot of jet fuel demand, roughly over 10 million tons, and that certainly would demand considering SAF facilities in this region. And we also talk about, I think Jim's presentation talks about a lot about our regional collaborations. We talk about nuclear power import into Hong Kong. We talk about water supply to Hong Kong. We talk about natural gas into Hong Kong. We also could have collaboration in our industry. Something smelly, use the cooking oil. Okay, with that, I will finish here and then pass to Richard. Thank you.
Thank you. Good introduction. So we sailed, we flew, and now we come back to the land. And apparently, I mean, according also to Diane's presentation, there's more support, arguably to say, from the government to the road transport sector. And aviation shipping, we may need more effort for now. So Richard, for you, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you today. I think Merlin asked a great question at the start of this conference about, how many of you think transport plays a part in your business's decarbonisation path? And that's actually something that nobody thinks about often. How do we get our goods, our services, our people to work every day? And decarbonisation isn't just about getting people into eco-friendly modes, low-carbon modes. It's about time, and time has a real economic impact on our whole economy in Hong Kong, but also our business economy. And at Citybus, we're really trying to be visionary in how we look at public transport. Hong Kong has a long-established public transport system. It's rated as, one of the best globally, and has many, many successes in terms of the franchise bus network and the MTRC, and a very, very strong airline network, as we've just heard. But it can't rest on its laurels. It has this strong pedigree, this strong past, but it has to be innovative in the future. It has to meet new demands and meet new target markets. Post-COVID, actually, some would say the world has changed, and actually we say it's changed for the better, to create new opportunities, to change people's thinking. We're adapting to new generations of people who are more ecologically aware than certain generations, certainly my own generation probably. And we can tap into that at an early age. We can get people to think about public transportation, about decarbonisation, about waste, all these types of things, and really, really make substantive change for society. And that engagement with those sector groups is often forgotten, politically sometimes, working with young people, working with schools, with universities, to really start affecting that and making the change real. So Citybus is in a unique position, possibly. I've worked in public transport for 30 years of my career, and have worked for private and government organisations in the UK and abroad in Europe before coming to Hong Kong. And we have a unique ownership structure. We are owned by a private equity investment fund called Templewater. So rich and deep experience in funding and financing. And one of our major shareholders is a company called Hans Energy. And you may have seen that in the news the last week or so. So why is that unique? It's unique because it gives access for us to different opportunities. It gives us access to funding solutions, decarbonisation funds. Every single government globally is talking about that, and we're talking about it here in Hong Kong every day. But it also gives us access to new thinking around energy supply, energy production, and what do we look for in the future? Is there one solution, or are there multiple solutions? And over the last 2 years, we've really had to step back and look at our products, both in terms of our decarbonisation journey, but also in terms of how we meet our customer expectation. And we started with a blank sheet of paper, and we're in an industry in buses, in road transport, that is quite challenging. It's a bit of a cottage industry, because actually bus production is quite small. Double-decker bus production globally is even smaller. And Hong Kong's unique. It has triaxle double-decker buses, different axle, different legislation. So we have to think really, really creatively here. And our engineering team and our business, we've got a great and innovative engineering team, started to work with various suppliers back in 2020 to say, how do we bring new products to the market? And the first one was an electric double bus, you see here on the screen behind you. And we brought that into operation in 2022. And at that time, we launched our Mission Zero transformation campaign. And we've, over the last 2 years, met many stakeholders, district councils, LegCo members, commercial stakeholders like many of you in this room, to start talking about what we're doing. We don't want to just be seen as a bus operator. We want to bring solutions. And many of you, when you're thinking about your decarbonisation journey and your green transport planning for your staff, come and talk to us. We can provide solutions that get your staff to your organisations to carry out their jobs every day. And we feel that actually at this point, we have been leading in some of these activities. Our team worked with a manufacturer in mainland China, Wisdom Motor Company, who are based in Fujian, to develop a product that was bespoke for Hong Kong. And Hong Kong's a difficult operating environment, high temperatures, high humidity, a lot of congestion, long operating cycles, to say, how do we get something that's fit for purpose? How do we evolve, and how do we work with the government to evolve legislation at the same time? So running for a year and a half now, the double-deck electric bus has been reliable. It's a first-generation vehicle, and later this year we'll bring second-generation vehicles to the market that will be operating in the new territories. And we're having a different approach to tendering as well. So we're a public body. We're governed by public body legislation and ordinance, and that sometimes brings some challenges in how we develop partnerships. But by doing new thinking, by putting in master framework agreements for supply of vehicles, we can think long-term and we can think strategically and work with supply partners to develop not only the best cost solutions, but the best practical solutions. And by the end of this year, we will be announcing at least 50 vehicles coming in to our network during 2025. On to hydrogen, perhaps the hot topic. The government is very, very soon, the next few weeks, going to be announcing their hydrogen strategy. And when we talk about hydrogen, colleagues talking earlier in shipping and other sectors, we have to think differently about hydrogen. We have to think multi-sector. We don't need to think about buses. We don't need to think about the railway or shipping. We have to think right across. We have to think about hydrogen supply, the cost of hydrogen supply, how the production is done, whether it's green, whether it's grey. And we also have to think about the infrastructure. Can that infrastructure become public, or can it become private? If it becomes public, actually, it's part of the core infrastructure of our country as we move forward. And there's a real reliance on that, but there's also an efficiency in public infrastructure if it's set up in the correct way. We can all benefit from that. We can use those resources, and instead of having multiple sets of infrastructure for each industry, there are opportunities where we can share, provide benefits to our businesses, but also provide benefits to the wider Hong Kong economy. And again, we introduced the hydrogen bus. It went into service in February this year. It's been incredible, running from West Kowloon to Kai Tak. Please go and ride on it if you haven't. It's a great experience. And again, we work with a manufacturer in mainland China. And Hong Kong's buses for many years have been built in Europe, even up till the last couple of years, and some businesses are still buying buses from mainland Europe. And we have a real strategy to focus our production about how we feed back into the greater China economy. That's a very, very important thing for us. We're really looking at all of our procurement streams, not just buses, because if we're spending within China, that's a good news story for China. The production model hydrogen bus is key because it will deliver the same operating characteristics as a diesel bus, so we can replace one for one, and that's very, very important, and electric today can't do that. And we're going to construct a second hydrogen refueling station this year in Chaiwan, in our head office, and we've been working very, very closely with the government to shape the ordinance, the regulations, and we shouldn't actually be trying to rewrite the book. In many, many countries in Europe, but particularly in China, in areas like Fujian, there is already hydrogen deployment on a wide scale. So we should learn from that, bring in those regulations, embrace that, and see how we can make it fit Hong Kong. And they will continue to be a strong partner as we move forward. So when we talk about sustainable mobility, I'm just going to end on this. You know, it's about how we manage the transition to zero emission. Actually, Euro 6 buses are incredibly clean, much cleaner than a Euro 6 car. They put less emissions out on the road. And we're going to move to zero emission. And to do that and decarbonising the sector, we have to reduce vehicles on the road. It's not just about clean energy sources. So we have to get more people onto public transport, whether that's rail or whether that's bus or whether it's green minibus. We really got to seriously think about that, because more cars doesn't create decarbonisation. Even electric cars still cause issues. We have to think about the operational costs, the infrastructure, as I mentioned, and the ownership of infrastructure, and where do we need subsidies in various sectors to support that transition. Because the transition to new energy does have a price tag, both up front and long term, certainly in the short to medium term through the transition period. But I think most importantly, I want to end on, as a professional sector in transportation, as professional businesses, we want to work together with government to have common goals. We want to collaborate and create opportunity. But the most important thing is that we have fresh thinking and look at new opportunities in a different way. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Wilson, you can pick it up from, of course, a cell EV truck, heavy-duty vehicle, which also on the road, but maybe in a different operational model. And of course, you have clients buying it. I think you will see some success or challenge. Oh, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm Wilson. I'm working for Sun Food Company Limited. I'm also the vice chairman of the Motor Trader Association, and it represents most of the car and truck dealers in Hong Kong. Sorry, can I come back to the first slide? Okay. Yeah. So maybe first of all, we have a look of some of the data, which is very similar to the shipping data. This is the information from EPD, and only up to 2021, but can also give you a rough idea where is our emission coming from in Hong Kong. And you can see, I would like to draw your attention to the last bar. It shows that most of the carbon monoxide are emitted from by transport, by all the vehicles in Hong Kong. And this is nearly half of the carbon monoxide emit. And then, as you know, it will turn into carbon dioxide immediately after it emits from the car. And even for other pollutant in Hong Kong, the transport also take a very big portion. Yeah. For the carbon monoxide, the emission is even higher than the power generation. So when we are talking about commercial vehicle, you may not have an idea how many commercial vehicles we have in Hong Kong. And I'm not going to touch on the bus because it's already mentioned by Richard. And I'm just mainly focusing on the vans and trucks in Hong Kong. And for the taxi, because it is based on passenger car, also not included in this chart. So you will see that for vans and truck in Hong Kong, there's nearly 120,000 units running every day on the road. And although it only accounts for 20% of the total population of vehicles in Hong Kong, but according to EPD, they told me that 70% of the emissions are coming from commercial vehicles rather than, and then the other 30% are from passenger car. Why is that? Mainly because the commercial vehicle, the running hour is much longer. Some of them can run 10 hours, 12 hours, or even the bus maybe, I don't know, maybe 16, 18 hours on the road. And also most of these commercial vehicles are running on diesel fuel. And it also contributes more pollutant, and also the engine are much bigger than passenger car. And also just mentioned the progress of electrifying the passenger car is in a very good progress. Last year and first few months of this year, 7 cars out of 10 cars, which is 70%, are already electric car, and the rest are still the ICE, internal combustion engine. And in terms of total population for passenger car, I think it's a good news that I think it just should have just break through 10% of the total population electric car, because government have a lot of the tax incentive for passenger car. But for commercial vehicle, I think you can see from the figures, we have only 600 up to last month, I think. We have only 600 electric, most of them are electric, commercial vehicles in Hong Kong. And most of them are vans, that means small size commercial vehicles. And then even we counted for the annual registration, it's only around 6% to 7% of the total newly registered commercial vehicle in Hong Kong. So a bad news is that there's a new energy transport fund by EPD, but they just announced that the subsidy for the new energy vehicles will be reduced by half. In the old days, every new energy vehicle can have a subsidy up to 3 million, but now it's cut down to 1.5 million. And then you may remember that for the total population of medium trucks is around 30,000 units, but there's only 50 applications are allowed by this funding. And yeah, this is really a bad news. So, but talk about some good news. Yeah, and it's a good news that the first 3 units of hydrogen fuel cell truck have just arrived in Hong Kong. I'm not supposed to give you the photos, but this is the spy photo from internet, so I'm not disclosing any secret to you. Yeah, and we will have our first hydrogen refueling station in Ao Tau, I think in the next few months by a Chinese oil company. And then maybe they have also some plan to build more. And these 3 units of vehicle are street washing vehicle. And then you may notice that they are still, these vehicles are still left-hand drive for the trial program initiated by EMSD. And this is a trial program first for the truck sector. So some of the recommendations for commercial vehicle decarbonizations, we may have to have a bigger funding, or if the funding is now not enough to support the trial of the company or for new energy vehicle, government may have to think about whether to inject new fundings for this new energy fund. And then we have to set up some charging stations solely for commercial vehicles. Otherwise, you will be occupied by the big population of the passenger car. We can also change some of the existing filling station into charging station. And then, of course, we have to expand the net filling station of hydrogen because of the big population of commercial vehicles. And government may also consider to offer tax incentive for companies who are willing to try the new commercial vehicle, new energy commercial vehicles. And echo to Richard, yes, we can think about not to drive so often our passenger car. We can take more public transport. But for commercial vehicle, we cannot avoid using them. Otherwise, we won't have food for the lunch. The food needs to be delivered by vans and trucks to this hotel so that we can have a nice lunch later on. So my conclusion is that there's still a very long way to go if you look at the figures. If you look at our infrastructure, and also the new energy commercial vehicle are much more expensive than the diesel vehicle. And but as you are all the decision maker of your company, I would recommend you to put up your first step, and don't wait until all the new energy vehicle, commercial vehicle are perfect. I can guarantee you, if you buy one, you will find that it's not perfect. But you have to start to try it, and then with more and more trial, and then improving of technology, and the price will go down. And of course, we will have one day we can replace the diesel vehicles over the world, because the diesel engine have been invented for more than 100 years. You cannot expect it can be replaced in one day or 1 year or even 10 years. So let's start our first step. Thank you.
Okay. The introduction takes longer than I expected. But anyway, come back to some discussion. I try to make it more like dialogue in a sense. Just now we talk about hydrogen, and the government is going to release hydrogen strategy in a sense. And maybe, again, to start with Wilson and Richard first, that's always asking on the commercial road transport space, competition selection between electrification and hydrogen usage. And especially Wilson, again, I ask, you supply to clients, right? What do they think? So maybe to start with this question, in the very near term, maybe mid-term, how you see the two kind of like sourcing would compete, and your view on it. And then maybe if Simon and Roberto, you think the hydrogen topic are relevant to your industry, you can chip in a few words after this.
As far as I know that maybe for Hong Kong, the government's view is that for the light commercial vehicle, they would like to have the battery electric vehicle, which is workable, yeah. And then still you still have quite a good payload, because the battery, although the battery is heavy, and you have to consider about the payload, but the light commercial vehicle can still do the works. And for the strategy is that for the heavy duty or medium duty or heavy duty trucks, tractor, and also the buses, they are more prefer to go into the hydrogen fuel cell direction. And I think this is the this might be the ultimate solution for new energy vehicle, for the which is the fuel cell. And a lot of customers, they will worry that, well, the range is not as good as our diesel vehicle, and then they have hundreds of worries. I can give you an example. One of the biggest online platform in Hong Kong, online shopping platform in Hong Kong, they just used one of our 5.5-ton trucks to deliver their goods. The range is only 200. They are so worried. And then there's also free temperature refrigerator at the back. And but at the end of the day, the truck can go back to their depot with more than 50% battery left. So don't worry, try it. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely concur with those points, and I think there's a mix of both that is able to be delivered. Actually, it's not dissimilar in bus to the commercial sector, where there are certain types of journeys we can operate, or certain schedules we can operate with electric vehicles. So their schedules, particularly in Hong Kong with the dynamic, where we can send the bus out in the morning, it will operate 1 or 2 trips from the new territories to Hong Kong Island, or vice versa. It will sit idle during the day, and then it will operate trips back in the night. So we can charge it overnight, and then we can opportunity charge it during the day to top it up if required for the evening journeys. When we look at the full operating cycle, it's impossible with an electric bus. Actually, as Wilson said earlier, 18 hours, some buses are out 22, 23 hours a day. And that just cannot be delivered with electric technology. You just have to increase the batteries to a point where the weight restriction is then negative to the operation of the vehicle. So hydrogen very much is a solution for us in that heavy vehicle operation. You know, like chiller units on trucks, we have air conditioning to maintain for passengers. We can take advantage of things like recycling technology, where we regen batteries, and you know, hydrogen vehicles, I think, probably just to make a point, are still battery electric vehicles. The only difference is that the hydrogen fuel cell is recharging the batteries on the bus. So there's a lot less batteries, less than a third that you would get on a full electric vehicle. And the hydrogen fuel cell is constantly recharging it, so it can run and run and run. And I think just, you know, to say very, very quickly that we should also think, you know, when we talk about decarbonisation, everybody talks about the vehicle, and they don't often talk about the supply chain of the fuel or the products that go into creating the zero emission vehicle. And I think when we look at long-term electric vehicles, could electric vehicles be the new asbestos in 20 years' time? You know, I sort of put that point out there as a provocative thought, because we're mining materials for batteries. We don't really know how we're going to dispose of batteries in the future, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we have to be thinking strategically about these things and not making short-term solutions that will have long-term impacts on society.
Yours, right?
Sure, yeah. Shipping doesn't use hydrogen too much. The challenge in shipping is that the size of the vessels, the weight, the distances that they have to cover, the technology is not that, there's not that many options. Hydrogen is not one of them. But I want to chime in here, bouncing off of something that Richard just briefly touched on, is where does the energy come from? We are, at the moment, we only have 2% of the availability to meet the global demand for shipping alone. Where does this all come from? A lot of it comes from China. China is going to be the Saudi Arabia of the future in terms of production of green energy. A lot of it comes from bio-waste. China is the biggest producer of bio-waste in the world, and this waste can be used then to generate something. Once it generates something, whether it's hydrogen, ammonia, methanol, we're talking about green fuel, green energy. We're not talking about gray. There's going to be a huge competitive requirement for that fuel. The availability is going to be very limited. When we get to that point, how then do we determine where that fuel gets allocated to? Well, if we're talking about Hong Kong, of course we need it for the public transportation, electricity, et cetera. But then how do we meet global demand? When we think about 90% of everything that you have in your house, everything that 90% of what you wear, 90% of what you consume comes aboard ships. And if these ships can't travel the distances that are required, we're going to have a problem. So I think we need to think about the limited availability of energy and how it is allocated and globally, not only within Hong Kong, not only within our industry, but across the board. And I think that that's going to be a big challenge going forward.
So you asked my next question. Indeed, we put up a question on biofuel supply chain, and I think the space, maybe I'll come back to you, Roberto, later, right? You asked, okay, supply is limited. How can we ensure the supply comes to Hong Kong? But then I can shift this already to Simon again from EcoCeres. We discussed, I think they are very confident they can supply to Hong Kong and now to Europe. How do you see this supply chain question from your perspective? Are we going to have enough supply to Hong Kong? And also, right, when we talk about this bio stock, essentially, let's take away the road transport first, is competing between shipping and aviation. So from a producer and supplying point of view, how do you see this?
Yeah, thank you, Merlin. Yeah, I think we are in a region, as Roberto mentioned, very rich of biomass resources. China is indeed the largest producer and exporter of the feedstock that we need, which is used cooking oil. China produces roughly around 4 million tons of used cooking oil at the moment. We are also fortunate to be close to another region which is also very rich in biomass, which is Southeast Asia. Malaysia and Indonesia produce a lot of palm oil and also waste palm oil as well. So to put into perspective, as Merlin, from what you mentioned, our plant in China, which is around 300,000 tons, we are in the market of 4 million tons of used cooking oil and over 1 million tons of waste palm oil. So we are in a fortunate region. But having said that, if you put into perspective, the global aviation sector require over 200 million tons of jet fuel. So certainly only from used cooking oil or biomass in Southeast Asia is not sufficient. So we do have to have long-term planning, and we do have to have technology to turn more biomass into the fuel that we need. And that's what we talk about. We have one technology which is, turn used cooking oil into SAF, but we also have another technology which is turn corn cob, another agricultural waste, which is a lot more abundant than used cooking oil, into SAF as well. Thank you.
Yeah, may I have some more additional information about the hydrogen production? And of course, all of us are talking about green hydrogen. Yes, green hydrogen is perfect. It's nothing better than that. But don't forget that hydrogen is the byproduct of a lot of chemical factory. Yeah, when you pass by this kind of factory, you will see the chimney burning a fire there. What they are burning? They are burning the byproduct, which is the hydrogen. Nowadays, they know that they can collect the hydrogen and then resell it to generate electricity or for all the vehicles. And just to give you a rough idea of how much is the hydrogen in China, the listed price per kg is 70 RMB, 70. But now they are selling at 35. Why is that? Because government subsidize for half of the price. And then after they sending to Hong Kong and then all the facility costs, the hydrogen selling in Hong Kong will be more than, as I heard, subject to their final announcement, will be more than 100 Hong Kong dollar per kg. And if you turn it into a medium truck commercial vehicle, it can run for, say, around 20 kilometers. And that means every kilometer is $5. Compared to diesel fuel, you can have $1.5 to $2 per kilometer. That means you have to prepare to pay 2 times or even 3 times for the hydrogen fuel. But anyway, the byproduct of hydrogen has to be produced anyway. It will produce anyway. We cannot maybe during the production of shampoo or other chemicals. Anyway, there's a lot of, this is another very important source of hydrogen. Yeah.
So yeah, if I can then, Hong Kong has a lot of passengers, and Hong Kong airport has always been a major hub. For shipping, Hong Kong, we don't produce anything. Everything that is produced is actually produced across the border. Hong Kong used to be the #1 port in the world in terms of volume because we were the only gateway for China. That was 10 years ago. In the last 10 years, China's infrastructure has surpassed us. And in terms of imports, yeah, we have 8 million people, but compared to 1.4 billion across the board, 8 million do not require as much attention for imports as many of the other areas. So ships today do not have to come to Hong Kong. Hong Kong's not a must-call port. But as residents, we want to make sure that those ships are coming here, because if they don't, the cargo gets discharged in Shenzhen, Shanghai. It then needs to be trucked or railed or barged to Hong Kong. That adds the cost of what we pay for. That decreases the value, the quality of the goods that we receive, the produce. So we want those ships to come to Hong Kong. If we don't produce cargo here, we need other reasons, other ways to attract those ships to come to Hong Kong. And I believe one of them is green fuel. So how do we then allocate that limited amount of green fuel between aviation, between shipping? One of the ways that Hong Kong has been able to excel themselves at the airport is that they have a fantastic I'm going to commend the Airport Authority. Airport Authority in Hong Kong has done tremendously well. Look what they have done in the last few years that they've been in operation, even during COVID, how much improvement there has been. We're number one in terms of cargo volume in the world. Of course, it's only 5 or 10% of global demand. For shipping, we don't have a driver in Hong Kong. There is no port authority. There's no maritime authority that is equivalent to what the airport has. There's no one that is at the front saying, this is where we're going, this is our strategy, this is our target, and this is how we're going to get there. These are our resources that we're giving from the government. We don't have that. So who's going to bat for us when it comes to availability of the limited fuel, green fuel? Who's going to do that? As our members, the ships, they don't belong to Hong Kong. They come to Hong Kong because there's a reason. But if Hong Kong doesn't have anything for them, they'll just go to Shenzhen. They'll go to Shanghai, where there is business. And if we don't have provide that driver, those reasons for for ships to come to Hong Kong, we will continue to see Hong Kong's cargo volume decline and the number of ships coming to Hong Kong declining. My pitch for everybody that can is we need a driver. We need somebody at the front. And it would be in the form of a statutory authority, a government party, if not the government, some entity that will stand there and represent our interests as an industry in Hong Kong, which we don't have today.
So it's a huge barrier you mentioned, and you mentioned we need the authority in a sense. Maybe just to quickly pick up what you said, apart from the authority, what do you think the industry can do or cannot? Beyond getting the authority, of course, that's something is in a wish list, but that could take long to discuss. In order to continue the topic on green fuel or keep the competition in Hong Kong, from the industry side of it, any additional point you want?
Sure, yeah. So in order for us to be able to have the green fuel here in Hong Kong, we need to have all of the stakeholders that are part of that supply chain. So there's the producer. Once the fuel is produced in China, how does it get to Hong Kong? We need those transport people. Once it arrives here, where is it stored? We need the storage partners. Once we have that, how do we get it from the tanks to the ships that are stationed in Kwai Chung, are unloading cargo in Kwai Chung? We need that barge between where the fuel is stored and where our ships are stationed. We need all of these components, all of these different stakeholders to provide that supply chain. We also need to have the financial capability to invest in green. There is a tremendous forum, the Green Finance Forum, Green Finance Association, that it looks at Hong Kong and Guangdong province that are trying to provide information to bankers and investors about what opportunities there are. But we need to see that component added in. And we need to see the users, us, the residents in Hong Kong, put a demand on green that will say this is important. If you go to Europe, for example, you will see a lot of companies that at the very entrance, they will say, this is our green footprint. This is how many people rode the bicycle, Jim, not the MTR, but they actually rode their bicycle to the office. This is something that is high on their agenda. In order for us to see green become a topic in Hong Kong that is really relevant, it needs to be us that start saying this is important for us as an industry, as a business, as an individual. And I will pay the price that is needed in order for us to be able to help.
Okay. Take one more question. Again, back to supply and demand, right? So taking again EcoCeres. I think Justin also mentioned, I think from the supply side, a lot of technologies are available. So how we ramp up the demand? We got a question. Maybe it's also good information for the audience to know the price premium. We discussed different fields, right? Just a quick sharing from your sector on these different fields. Wilson, you mentioned already green hydrogen, but let's take a quick round to share the price premium to our audience so that they grab more information on that. Is a question asked? Anyone want to try?
I think there's a few things. When we talk about the price premium, we've got to think about the asset premium. So the asset costs more in the first place. So electric double-decker buses are coming down to a price point of around about the same price as diesel double-decker buses, and we've seen a huge shift in that over the last 10 years, and that's based on volume, battery manufacturing technology, production, upscaling. All those things have had an impact on that. Will they get cheaper? No, they're probably around about where they're going to stay now. I think we've got to be also careful when we look at assets around what we call the TCO model, the total cost of ownership model. And, lots of people talk about that. They say, electric vehicles or hydrogen vehicles are going to be much, much cheaper to operate than diesel or petroleum vehicles. Actually, when you look at it, that's not the case. Okay, you're not replacing, in a diesel bus, you probably replace the engine, the gearbox, the axles every 4 to 6 years. So in a 18-year life scale, you're probably doing it 2 or 3 times. Trucks will be similar if they're covering high levels of mileage. In an electric bus, you have to replace the batteries. Only 2 years ago, we were saying we're going to replace the batteries every 4 years. The battery cost replacement is about 35% of the asset cost. Now we're making great strides, and they're saying, well, every 10 years we can replace the battery. So, one battery change in the vehicle's life, maybe. So that gets it actually to a comparable cost to diesel vehicles over its whole life cycle. It still needs maintenance on the brakes, the steering, and all the other components. And then, we've got to look at the energy supply. Wilson touched on the cost of hydrogen today, and that's a real factor. It really is, and we have to get that down, and we have to get that down by moving technology forward. But we've also then got to think about electricity and, the cost of production and the availability of production of electricity. And we've got some unique situations in Hong Kong. We've got the MTRC, daytime operation draws huge amounts of electricity from the network, most of which is produced in mainland China. And we've got to think about how we can think smart. How can we use electricity when it's not being drawn by the MTRC, off-peak? Actually, most buses, most trucks are parked at night. So, when we look at the infrastructure, we say, how can we share it or share even the supply of that? And, a colleague here spoke about, bio and things like that. So, there's also that waste to energy argument, about landfill and, how we can burn landfill. And, again, the offset gases, can come into hydrogen. And just to end, really, I think that we were talking about collaboration and supply. I think when the chief executive came into office, a couple of years ago now, he made a statement about how to break down barriers between bureaus in the government. And that was one of his key initiatives. And I think what is happening is there's a real sea change. So the interdepartmental working group on hydrogen that we've been working very closely with has brought together bureaus, has brought together departments, EEB, FSD, many other government agencies to start thinking holistically about how do we solve the future problems. And that's just the first step. The hydrogen strategy, I think, will be the next step. But we've got to keep pushing forward. We've got to bring those government partners and agencies together. We've got to bring the commercial sector together. And if we have one voice that is collaboratively working to achieve the outcomes, the progress will be much quicker.
Can I quickly jump on? I think for many topics, for aviation or for shipping, always we talk about intergovernmental working group or task force. And apparently, you mentioned on the hydrogen front, works all right going on. What is the success factor that you see that other sectors, when pitching for such intergovernmental working group, could work?
Okay, yeah, I mean, just quickly, I'm conscious of time, and I think it's been a huge success. But I think the critical frustrations that maybe and challenge is, you're meeting many people who want to take a very risk-based approach. And we need people to think outside the box. They need to look at the vision and then say, how do we achieve the vision? How do we achieve it commercially? How do we make it happen so that it's sustainable? And I think the success factor of that group is incredible because there was no legislation to operate hydrogen vehicles in Hong Kong. We've got legislation, base legislation, to operate hydrogen bus. It's the first hydrogen vehicle in Hong Kong. Wilson talked about the trucks that are coming on board. There's also a hydrogen tug, I think that's the right description, that will be moving containers around the container port early next year. So we've really made that step, bringing those agencies together. And then the next step is actually saying, oh, we can run hydrogen vehicles through the tunnel. So we've now got that approval to run buses through the tunnel. We haven't done it yet. We're going to do it in the next few weeks. But it's no different to running a taxi through the tunnel, which is fueled by gas as well. No different at all. So it's just changing people's thinking. And it's been a huge success.
Okay, we're taking long. And then back to my original question, the price premium. Want to address it? Or anyone?
Just a rough idea. And for the light-duty commercial vehicle like vans, and the price nowadays, I'm talking about products from China. Nowadays, the price will be very similar to a diesel vehicle. With roughly around 300,000, you can buy an electric van. But if you go up to, say, medium trucks, the premium may be around 50%. Yeah, and then the heavier the tonnage, the more the battery, the more expensive is the vehicle. And for hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, you can count it roughly 2 to 3 times of a ICE vehicle, a diesel vehicle. But I haven't mentioned that if you use a electric light commercial vehicle, in fact, you can gain back some of the saving from the fuel because the electric price in Hong Kong is quite reasonable, and you may save 30 to maybe up to 50% of your fuel costs.
Maybe I can, Merlin, I can add on about the green premium. So we produce SAF, and it is true that SAF is more expensive than a normal jet fuel oil. Market price today for SAF is around $2,000 per ton. Jet fuel is around 800 to 900. So we're more than doubled, more expensive. And as Richard, you mentioned, yeah, there's a few part to the cost, asset cost. Building a SAF refinery is not cheap. It's around more than $300 million. But another cost is also very expensive is the feedstock cost. So the used cooking oil is actually more expensive than the jet fuel oil. So the market price of used cooking oil is $900. Jet fuel is $800. So the question is, why is the used cooking oil so expensive? I think it's 2 days ago that the government announced that, okay, we don't have to pay for the waste that we discharge, right? But a hotel like this or restaurant like this, they actually get paid for the used cooking oil that they discharge. So we believe that we should return the nature of used cooking oil, which is a waste. So we should encourage the government to regulate this used cooking oil back to its nature, it's a waste. Because at the moment, frankly, there's a lot of competition for these resources. Prices has been bid up. But if you look at examples, let's say in China, there's a closed loop mechanism that in Shanghai and Beijing, there's only one buyer for the used cooking oil, and the price is actually below market price. And if we have a lower cost feedstock, we certainly can produce a lower cost stuff. So what we propose is to look at how we should return the nature of used cooking oil back to the waste instead of buyers bidding up the price.
Okay. They asked me to wrap it up, but Roberto, you didn't.
Not on that question. I was just going to offer one last closing comment.
Do you want to?
Yeah, so I was going to say these are all good comments and discussions. I think, though, we need to remember our objective is to reduce global warming. As a point, reducing carbon emissions, net carbon emissions, is not going to get us there. We know from science that 50% of the carbon CO2 emissions stay in our atmosphere for 120 years. That means the only time that we're actually going to see a reduction in global warming is when our emissions are less than the lifespan of carbon in our atmosphere. So this is, we're only just touching the beginning of the first comments. I think that there's a lot that can come out of this, but it really needs to translate into longer and broader terms of engagement within the entire community. And that's where I think all of us in the room play a part.
Good with the conversation? Yeah, I'm sorry, I actually was prepared to let you ask questions, but I got very bold letter saying ask me to really wrap up for now. So in any case, I mean, the purpose of our section is difficult. I'm trying to moderate because they come from different sectors. I hope you enjoy the cross dialogue between them. And they are all here and their colleagues. And if you have particular question, maybe on the aviation front, regarding to SAF, shipping, cross-sector decarbonization, or commercial vehicle, please reach out to them, and of course to BEC. With that, I want to close the discussion and keep your questions and ask us and them later. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch.